To Real Tech for Real People, episode 123. This is Tony Pittman with the star of the show, Steve Brady.
Oh, I'm with the star of the show, Tony Pittman.
I had to get that in there quickly on you.
Yeah, this is where we make tech not only for real tech for real people, we make tech as easy as 1, 2, 3 on episode 123. Lots of good stuff coming up on this episode. But Tony, I think we want to point out again that we are proud to announce once again.
Very proud.
Because, while the news came out that Leo Laporte and the Twit Network will make $6 million in 2012, the Tech Podcast Network is working to congeal and bring ourselves even closer into a more tightly fitting network. And if it's tech, it's here at the Tech Podcast Network. And so if you listen to this podcast and other great podcasts at techpodcast.com, you're going to find that we're beginning to bring more and more of these shows together every day. So stand by for more interesting tech over at the techpodcast.com Tech Podcast Network, because we are proud to be there.
We certainly are. On to the news.
On to the news. Yes, onward. Let's don't drop the news. Once again, we lead with fear and trepidation.
And security.
Security. Yeah, Dropbox had a security breach. And this is one where somebody was able to get a hold of passwords. They were able to get into people's Dropbox accounts. And then guess what? They found an account. They got into a Dropbox account for one of the people that works at Dropbox. Where they were able to go in and find out files that had email addresses of all the people that had these accounts. And the way they did this was another classic example. They found somebody who had been reusing passwords, and by finding people who had reused passwords from one site where they stole a username and password because it was kept unsecure, where it wasn't stored securely, they were then able to go and say, well, let me try that Tony Pittman at gmail.com username and password on Dropbox, and let me see if that gets me into that account.
Hey, why'd you have to suggest mine?
Because let's see, professor at gmail.com might be me.
I'm gonna go.
Well, if you have a secure random password that you only use on Dropbox, you're in much better shape, as is always the case. Randomize your passwords. Use a tool. LastPass is the tool of choice for Stephen Gibson. PasswordSafe is my favorite tool, but it tends to not work on the Mac. But the idea is it generates randomly large, full of all sorts of garbagey things, passwords, and you can store the password in this encrypted file. So even though I store my PasswordSafe file on Dropbox, which may be hackable, the file itself is encrypted with a password that only I know, and only I can decrypt when I download that file. And one set of my passwords can only be used with my YubiKey. And I think we mentioned the YubiKey a few episodes back, this little thing I just put in and press the button and off goes a one-time password code. And by doing it that way, I don't have to remember hundreds of passwords, but I do use hundreds of passwords, every one of them randomly generated and secure. So if you use Dropbox, it's not secure. You might want to consider SpiderOak or some of those other things we've talked about. But hey, this is happening all over the place. In fact, we have a story about this happening through Apple Care.
We certainly do, but one word of warning here. You mentioned Dropbox, you mentioned these passwords, and when all of our listeners, the many hundreds and hundreds, thousands. The throng of them that listen, if you
Thanks again, Jason.
and you go to change your Dropbox password, which I just did, oddly enough, it's one of the few sites I can think of where when you change your password, you put in your new password once.
Ooh, they don't check it.
They don't ask you to verify it. That is not best in class, I don't think, because if you mistype it, which is easy to do if you only type in it once, I guess you could be locked out of your Dropbox.
Well,
so be careful. Be careful.
Especially if you're typing in randomly generated stuff. That's what, one of the things about these tools is I generate the password, I cut and I paste it in. So the possibility of me typing it in wrong is slim in that case. But you're right, that is not best of breed. It's almost as bad as what Microsoft's Outlook.com is doing when you create a new account there, where they said passwords no longer than 16 characters. Which,
no longer. Wow, that narrows the
field, right?
The search down. Yeah.
Yeah. So whereas they usually say no shorter than 8 characters, by doing this, they've done something in reverse. So the story about Apple and Matt Honan. Matt Honan was with who?
I think he's at Wired now, but I believe he was at Gizmodo until very recently. But apparently, from what I read, nothing to do with who he is or where he worked really motivated this hack on him, which is a little bit of a surprise. What motivated it was he has the Twitter handle Matt, M-A-T, and this hacker wanted it, I guess, and that's what motivated, which is kind of odd, but that's what the person claimed.
Interesting. So now, how did they get this password? Do you remember the story there?
It's a very, very convoluted story of a bunch of accounts linked together, etc. But from what I've read, it started with, hey, this guy wanted to get to his Twitter account. Knew he was a iCloud user, and so the way it started was actually at Amazon, from what I can tell.
Amazon.
Yes, he called up Amazon and said, "Hey, I need to add." He got the guy's address from doing a whois on his domain, right? So if you don't have a private domain, someone can whois you and get your address. So armed with that address, he called Amazon and said, "Hey, I need to add another credit card to my account." And Amazon said, "Okay, what's your address?" He knew the address. And then he said, "Well, I need to update a credit card." And the Amazon person said, "Which one? The one with the last 4 digits of 2322 or 5?" And he said,
man.
That one." And so then he had his address and the last 4 digits of one of his credit cards. And because Matt, I mean, it's a very serendipitous type thing, I guess, right? So then when the person called Apple, the same credit card was the one Matt used at Apple. So he said, "Hey, I need to reset my password." And they said, "What's your address?" He knew that. They said, "What's the last 4 of your credit card number?" He knew that. And then from that, got a temporary password issued by Apple. And then because this guy had so many things linked up to other accounts, like you set up a backup email account if you forget your Gmail password and all this stuff, right. Everything tied back to this iCloud account that he now had full access to. Right, so he could go around the internet and say, "Oh, I forgot my password," and they'd say, "Okay, we just sent your password to." He was getting everything, and then he wiped Matt's devices, his mobile devices, because he could use Apple's, remote wipe software. So it was really just an unfortunate thing, and lots of companies were involved. I mean, Apple gets the headline because they're Apple, but yeah, this shed a light on, I think, a lot of vulnerabilities that we probably all would be subject to if someone really, for whatever reason, our Twitter handle, they don't like us, whatever. It just shows you if someone wants to target you, there's enough information out there for them to piece together these rabbit trails and get you. I mean, that's the scary thing it tells me.
Well, the interesting thing, the reason they went for Apple, they talked about Apple in the story, really is because of the default nature of what Honan had done, which was simply he'd put all his username information in a file in his iCloud. I mean, it's the exact same thing people do on Dropbox. So in this case, it happened on iCloud. It could have happened on Dropbox. It could have happened any other place.
It could happen
You're
anywhere.
right. We go after Apple because it was Apple, and we're like, "Oh, Apple helped." But you're right. This is one of those things where you just, if you encrypt the file, how many times can we tell people? You come up with some way to encrypt the file. Don't store it on a text file, especially in the cloud, anywhere where someone can get through. And this was what they call social engineering. And Free Kevin, Kevin Mitnick was the world's evilest hacker. I mean, he was kept in solitary confinement because the police had convinced the judge that he could start a thermonuclear war by whistling tones into a telephone. utter crap, right?
Right, right.
Because all he had really done was exactly the same thing. He'd call somebody up and say, "Hey, Tony, I'm sitting here over at the office in Poughkeepsie, and I left my other thing at home. I need you to patch me through." So he did a lot of this with the phone company. "I need you to patch me through to the routers," and they patch him through to a different phone system, or they'd give him a username and password to get him into something because they thought he was one of them, and I can't really do it. "Yeah, I understand. So, well, yeah, man, I got to do this though. Would you mind calling your supervisor and just having him call my supervisor and let him know that we're not going to be able to do this because we understand the rules?" And they go, "Oh, no, I'll help you out," right? So it's this whole social engineering thing. You're going to help each other out. You trust somebody because they sound trustworthy. You know,
Yeah.
and this is the definition of a con man, right? A con man is a confidence man or a confidence person.
There
I
you
mean, that's
go.
where it comes from. They build up confidence in someone to the point where, well, you feel like you can trust them.
Right.
That's the total evilness there about this whole thing. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just you're absolutely right. It's a whole different level of vulnerability. I mean, this guy could have had the strongest passwords you could imagine on pretty much every one of his sites, but with the pieces that fell into place here, it wouldn't have mattered, right? It wouldn't have mattered because he was able to, essentially go around that stronghold of strong passwords, and through the trustworthy nature of most people, get what he wanted. And part of me feels like, well, is this just the new reality we live in? Where this is going to happen a certain amount of time. I hate to go too far off course, but we've had some tragic shootings here in the U.S. And I saw Montel Williams. I don't know if you know him. He's known as a talk show host, but ex-Marine. And he was being interviewed and said, "Look, I'm a gun owner." He said, "I own." Speaking as him, not me. He's like, right. "I own a lot of guns that people probably say I don't need to own. They're more powerful than I should have, but I'm trained, etc." And he said, "Is this issue really about guns? Hey, there was a story in the Bronx," he said, "where someone walked down the street and just randomly pulled out a knife and slit 3 people's throats."
Oh, yeah.
And so, to me, it's the same thing. Got all these strong passwords, is this just that type of thing where somebody wants to be deviant and harmful? Can you take away every tool they could use to do this to people? No. I mean, no. Just like taking away guns. Well, people will use knives or hammers or whatever. I mean, if there's nothing you can do in practicality to really exist in today's world and be productive and not be somewhat vulnerable to these types of things. I mean, I think it's just part of what we have to accept in society today.
Well, when we look at it, you think, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is you
live under a rock.
If you forget your password, if you lose your password, you can call me all day long. We are never going to reset your password for you. We're never going to do anything. And so, hey, guess what? You're just going to have to create a whole new account because
that digital identity is dead, right? Yeah. I mean, and that's no one's going to want that, right? So
I bought all this music on iTunes, and now you're going to tell me I can't listen to my music anymore. Yeah. I've paid $1,000 on iTunes Music because now I can't decrypt it because of the password. Yeah, so the only hope we have is that you make things as difficult as possible by having strong passwords, keeping those encrypted. Don't write them in a file. Don't put it where somebody can find it if they're able to hack through these sorts of things. So at most, 1 or 2 passwords would get broken.
Yeah, but what can companies do if people, and this is going to always happen, forget their passwords? I mean, human beings, well, it's going to happen. Or like in the case of what could have happened on Dropbox, you go to change it and you mistype it because they don't ask you to verify it. Is all that stuff just out of your reach now? No, there's got to be some way these companies can support users too. So I don't know how you solve it. I mean, I suppose what could Apple do? Say go into an Apple store and show ID? I mean, but okay, that works for a lot of people, but certainly not everybody, right? So it's a hard problem.
One of the interesting things I read today, as a matter of fact, and I heard this yesterday listening to a back copy of Security Now, but I experienced it myself, is one of the software packages I was installing that will allow you to do group management similar to SharePoint. It says, look, if somebody loses their password, we've hashed the passwords. We used a SHA-1 hash. and it may or may not be salted. That could be a problem. But we've hashed the password to it. And that's about as close as you can get to secure, but somebody had called in or written into the Steve Gibson.
That would be the same problem here, Steve, though, right? Because because they have to give you that change password code, just like they gave this guy who went after Matt this temporary password. I mean, same thing, right?
But the difference would be, do I give you a temporary password over the phone? Because the person wrote into the Gibson and said, yeah, I said I needed to have my password, and so they sent me clear text in email my password. I mean, how many times have you logged into someplace where you set it up and they send you an email verifying you, saying, here's your new password, and they tell you should change it when you log in, but they don't force you to do that. And so now in your email inbox, you've got a password with your username sitting in there, and if it's a business account of any sort where you have a credit card in there, wow, look at that. You've now given them access to your credit for whatever it is, and if it's Amazon, you're buying stuff off of somebody else's account, or they're buying it off of yours.
Yeah, it's a dangerous world we live in.
How about this? World of Warcraft. I mean, Kenny and I can't remember any of the other characters in South Park, but they had that whole big World of Warcraft episode in South Park, and it's a very big game. Lots of people play it. World of Warcraft had their system hacked. They had accounts stolen, usernames stolen, and passwords. The hashed passwords were stolen, so the encrypted passwords were stolen. So they go, we're secure. You're secure. We recommend you change your passwords anyway, though, because, and here comes the big quote, in addition to the email lists, and by the way, secure passwords, the personal security question and mobile and dial-in authentication information for users in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Latin America were also illegally accessed. So now, hey, Tony, that question where they ask you what was your favorite color and who did you date in high school?
Yeah.
Well, now they not only do they know such bizarre and interesting questions, they can use that to change your account in World of Warcraft, where, by the way, you pay to use the service, or your credit card numbers are up there with the last four visible. So what do they say? They say, go ahead and change your password. We'll make it secure again. Same sort of thing, though. Yeah. So they did the right thing. They encrypted the password. They hashed it. They probably even salted it. They're pretty good about that. But because you have these questions that banks are asking these days, what do? I actually had to call an organization and say, I can't get into my account because I don't remember what my favorite things are.
Yeah, I'm fickle. I'm fickle. I don't know what my favorite movie of all time was.
Well, that's
or guess what? I saw the Avengers. No, that's my favorite movie. I don't know what it was when I set up this account.
Well, I'll tell you. Here's the deal. I have 3 favorite movies, but I won't use those. I actually use PasswordSafe to write the answer to those questions down.
And you pick random movies?
Because it secures it, and I pick a different movie for every. I mean,
it is more secure.
Because I'll tell you right now, everybody knows this if you asked me before. Dr. Strangelove, Casablanca, The Princess Bride, okay? And then Saving Private Ryan's number 4. So I have favorite movies, and I talk about them all the time. I talk about them in class. I'm not going to use that as a security question.
Right. Not too smart, is it?
Yeah, or if you lived in the same house your whole life till you went away to college, and they go, on what street did you live when you were 10? Yeah. Well, the same one when I was 1 and the same one when I was 21. This isn't a very good question.
No, not for some people. You're absolutely right.
So you pick a street 3 over or something, right?
Yeah.
My best friend lived on whatever. So a lot of security news today, a lot of talking about this, but seriously, people, if you haven't talked to your family and friends, friends don't let friends have unsecure passwords. Friends don't let family do it, absolutely, because guess what? Family's going to be the first one to sell you out. Because when they can get into something, they're going to be able to figure out from your family account where you did live and what your favorite color may have been, especially if they go and ask you this.
It's definitely a trade-off between, convenience and security, right? Because, having all those passwords, difficult passwords, having to use a tool like LastPass or 1Password, that's work. Right? It's inconvenient. And a lot of people can't stomach the inconvenience, so they try to make it easy, pick simple passwords, and use them all over the place. but certainly a trade-off you're making, right? Because the more you're more vulnerable when you haven't put in the work to secure yourself. So everyone's got to realize what trade-off they're making.
Yeah, Steve Gibson talks about the thing called the haystack, and that's where you just pick 4 unrelated words out of the dictionary. Easy to remember 4 words, and you might be having a 25-character password this way. So you could come up with like cow, car, ski, water, and you can remember those 4 words. But when you have 20 different accounts, now you got to remember 80 different words, and there's sequence that those words have.
I mean, yeah, you can remember one set of those 4 words, right? But the minute you use that on more than one site, you've drastically reduced your level of security. So
yeah,
it's a tough thing.
And one of the tough things about all this is we are curious people. And I don't know about you, but have you ever sat down and thought about, I wonder what so-and-so's password is? I mean, hey, I know the most often used password is 123456. I wonder if somebody at the office did that. And I've never sat down and tried to hack somebody's computer because I was in the government. If I tried that just for fun, I'd still go to jail for a really long time. but I'm curious, right? I wonder about these sorts of things. Curiosity is a human condition.
It is, but not human.
Curiosity is not human. Well, you're right. Curiosity itself is not. Wow. Yeah, what a deal there. By the way, Matthew told me, speaking of curiosity, and you're bringing this up because it's on Mars, Matthew did say he heard a story that a cat had become a stowaway on the spaceship.
Isn't that an urban legend? Is that true? I heard that.
He said,
also.
yeah, that a cat stowed away on this mission. And so we now know with certainty that curiosity did, in fact, kill the cat.
If it's true. If that's true.
If it's true.
I have a hard time believing that one, but it's funny. Unless you feel for the cat. Yeah.
Well, it's a feline phenom, I guess is what that would be. Well, one of the things that ties us into tech, there's an awful lot of cool tech about the landing. I don't know if you saw the actual video they did of looking down on Mars as it landed. You get to watch the heat shield fall away, and then the dirt get kicked up. Amazing,
just amazing. Yes.
And the most impressive camera on this thing, the most impressive camera. Matthew just got a new Sony. He's got a 24 megapixel digital SLR. 24 megapixels. Mine from 5 years ago was 12 megapixels. My phone, 8 megapixels. What's your iPhone 4S? 8? Yeah. Curious, the big $2.6 billion rover has the best resolution on the 2 best cameras, 2 megapixels.
2 megapixels.
2 megapixels.
Well, it took Curiosity like 18 years to get there. So,
from concept to delivery,
you have to consider when that design went in place, 2 megapixels was probably an awful lot.
They locked it in, and I think they said 2004. So, where were we in 2004 with these cameras? This was pre-iPhone, right?
Pre-iPhone, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think in 2004, I might, 5 megapixels or something was pretty big right back then. So
those are your Canons, right?
Yeah.
So
but still, yes, it is a little, it is a little surprising that all that technology, such a wondrous feat of technology, and yeah, it has a 2 megapixel camera, but it still, by far, will be the best images ever from Mars. So I can't wait to keep seeing more of them.
And a lot of other things that they're going to be doing on that thing. But the other limiter for them is, we talk about the fact that Leo Laporte and his group lives in the San Francisco bubble. Everybody has 100 megabit speed. I mean, not everybody lives in Kansas City with gigabit speed coming down the road, but they have all these high speed things. They being the collection of robots on Mars are living in the space equivalent of rural America.
Yeah, not a lot of bandwidth, right? Connecting Mars to
they're like
here.
low DSL speed. They're sitting at like 1.5 megabit per second at best, right? So you really don't want to be moving these super large pictures anyway.
Well, and it's got a little bit farther distance to travel.
Yeah, if you drop a bit.
You got 7 minutes to wait for a replacement.
Yeah. So you got some time there. So it's interesting. 2 megapixels. But hey, you know what? Like you said, it's going to be great pictures, great science with the lasers that they're doing, and great to follow this up over the next 2 years. And who knows? The other project was supposed to go for 90 days, and Odyssey, or whatever you call it,
Opportunity,
there we go, is still roaming around.
Still.
8 years later. So, I mean, I was still on active duty in the Air Force when it landed.
Yeah,
So,
these are long projects. I mean, the thing that's amazing to me, though, is how they can navigate these things, get them to where they're supposed to be, enter Mars's atmosphere.
right.
And, it's like controlling a remote control car with a 7-minute lag and not hitting anything. Like, how? I mean, that's amazing that it can be done. I mean, there's got to be so much automation and real-time sensing going on by the rover and the reentry vehicle itself. Obviously, the folks here on Earth, when that's happening, they're just spectators, right? The thing's got to take care of itself, and that's amazing that it could do it.
Yeah, they're not even spectators. They're like us, waiting till right now to watch the Olympics. I mean, it's 9 o'clock at night, almost 10 o'clock, and now we're seeing what happened in England 8 hours ago. It's the same thing. It
is amazing that we can make stuff work given those situations. But I also read it's not only a 2-megapixel camera, but I think I heard someone on MacBreak Weekly claim that it's basically a PowerPC G3 processor.
That's good.
G3, not G4 or G5, which Apple was running prior to going to Intel, but G3 processor technology. So it's not immensely powerful. But I guess, you talk about, what they call ASICs, right? These application-specific integrated circuits. And, one of the reasons clock speed is so important in our PCs and phones and tablets is because those devices aren't developed for much very specific, right? You need to put them in people's hands. They might want to read a book on them, watch a video, record a podcast, watch a podcast. I mean, so you're giving up a lot of raw speed and power because you've made this thing able to do so many different things. You can develop a much less powerful but more capable processor if you're saying, look, I'm only building this to do what Curiosity needs it to do. And so that's a big difference, and people don't understand that. But for what it's being called to do, it's obviously working well.
Yeah, absolutely. And my dad, maybe you don't know this, my dad worked on the Apollo program.
I did not know that.
And he did the guidance system for Apollo and for the lunar lander. So I always give him a hard time when they say that Apollo 11 was about to land in a 100-yard field of rocks, that they had to fly over. And I go, Dad, you put them in the wrong spot. He's like, nope, that's where they thought they wanted to go, and that's why they had a pilot flying it for Apollo 11. But he'll talk about the fact that when they had, for their data storage, they didn't have hard drives with platters. They had a cylinder that was spinning around, had 8 kilobytes of data that it could store. Wow. And as it's spinning around, they actually had to pay attention to the rotational speed. They didn't put data sequentially. They put it where, as it finished reading one piece and went for the next, how fast had that cylinder turned so they could get that next piece off as the cylinder was spinning around. And so they went to the moon on 8 kilobytes worth of hard drive storage or hard memory storage as they kept writing and reading off of that thing. Impressive stuff.
Wow.
And now we go where we talk about this, and we talk about 2-megapixel cameras and being curious and being on Mars, and kind of bring it back to the handheld, Google Translate, which I don't know if you've played with that app or not.
Oh, I have, yeah. I have a team of people I work with who speak Spanish, Romanian, and all these other languages. I've been using it. It's pretty good.
Well, they've added eyes to it, if you will. Obviously, your phone has a camera, and they've integrated it with the Google goggles, and so now what it will do is it'll use the OCR for pictures. It'll scan it, and it'll translate what it sees in pictures. So you'll be able to go in and scan. If you want to, the picture doesn't look very clear. Suddenly it's a triangle or a circle. Which one's the men's or the women's? Because I don't know hombre from anything else. And so, let me take a picture of the bathroom and see if this is the one I really want to go with.
It's like a beer goggle. It's like a beer goggles remedy, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, I don't.
You've lost the ability to discern. It'll help you out. I don't know.
I mean, just imagine what you could do with newspapers, right? You really are really curious about this newspaper headline, and it's a paper newspaper, so you can You can use Google Translate now to take a picture of that.
Yeah, wasn't
it.
there? What didn't someone have an app that would do that too? Like you could download these different languages. I think we might have talked about it on the show a long time ago, where you could point your phone at some other language and it would
I remember that.
kind of unscramble it and put it in another language. Sounds like Google's kind of taken up that challenge too. There, I mean, I don't think it's going to be long before you'll be able to, fly halfway around the world, go up to a newspaper rack, and just hold up your phone and say, "Oh, now I see what the news is here," because it'll just in real time just be able to tell you what it says in your native language. I mean, we will see that very soon. I think that's imminently doable, don't you?
It's Star Trek Universal Translator, right? We're not doing it with Klingons. We're doing it with French and Spanish and Chinese. And one of the things I thought was interesting, I would cut and paste and translate through Google Translate with my my nephew and his girlfriend with their respective languages that they've been studying. Mm-hmm. He was in China for a year, and I'd drop something in Chinese, and he'd laugh. And you go, "You using Google Translate again?" Because it would get just a couple things a little wrong.
Yeah.
But that's.
But you could still have a conversation. I mean, I don't think we're that far off from say two people like you and I here are able to sit and talk in a Google Hangout, and I'm speaking English and you're speaking, say, French, and we're just hearing in our native language. I mean, I think that once we have the right type of raw processing power and things, that's not going to be out of this world to expect, I don't think.
That'll be really good if we're ever able to get to that point. Like I say, it'll be like the Star Trek Universal Translator, which was that was just a convenience they had so they could do television shows.
Right. I mean, just think at some point you're going to be able to have a Democrat and a Republican on either side of the discussion, and they're going to sound like they agree.
Oh no, I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening.
Depends on who writes the translation program. We'll see. If that can work.
Wouldn't it be nice if at some point in this whole thing we got away from them saying, "Look, it's a fundamental disagreement on philosophy," and they say, "Hey, look, we both want the same thing. We both want a robust economy. We both want people working. We just think the other guy is flat out wrong." You can't get there from here. I would love that level of honesty in a conversation. But
doesn't sell enough ads, that honesty stuff,
And since we're going to talk politics, I really want to delve into politics here. You may have seen the stories about Windows 8 and Metro, and they're changing the name.
Yeah, odd timing. I mean, put it this way: whether you think the idea is good or bad, now I mean, it seems like an odd time once you've already, invested this much in the name. People been anticipating release, now release, and then you change it. It seems odd to me, the timing more than anything else.
Well, they said that apparently, for those that don't know, Microsoft has come out and they said, okay, it's the operating system interface formerly known as Metro. And it has nothing to do with artistic freedom or an artist. It has everything to do with a company called Metro in Europe, who was a Microsoft partner who said cease and desist, please.
Bad.
And Microsoft said, okay, fine. We don't want that whole Samsung Apple bad blood thing going on here. So they're pulling back the name, and along with this, at the same time that happened, they said, oh, by the way, when you log into Windows 8, you're always going to be taken to the the interface formerly known as Metro screen, the tile screen.
Right.
And a lot of people are up in arms going, wait a second, I can't get to my desktop when I log in. Well, here's my first ever Windows 8 tip. When you get to that screen, hit the window key. It toggles between the tile screen.
If you have a window key, hit it. That's what you're saying.
That's true. Yeah, I actually happen to have a Mac desktop. I think you noticed I have a Mac keyboard here that I use on my Windows machine.
Oh, I knew you, of course, had something like that. I didn't know you were using it. But but basically, in a Windows. On a Windows keyboard, you can just hit the window key, and that'll take you to the traditional desktop.
It'll take you to the desktop. You hit it again, it actually takes you back to the tablet key, the tablet screen, the tab screens. So it's really simple. Everybody's complaining, oh, it's one more keystroke I have to hit. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. You can also drag your mouse over because one of the tiles is desktop, and you could click on the tile for the desktop too.
You could do that.
I have absolutely not yet found that to be an inconvenience. So let me give my quick review of Windows 8. I promised I'd talk a little bit about this.
But by the way, on the Metro point, did I read correctly? They're not going to call it Metro. They're just going to call it Windows 8 style.
Yeah, call it Windows 8
applications. Forget Metro.
It's a Windows 8 user interface.
Okay.
So when I go there, I'm really liking Windows 8. I mean, I'll tell you this right up front. I go to Windows 8, I log in, and yes, the tiles are there, but some of the apps that I've set on there are a news app, a sports app, a finance app, and so right there on that main screen, I can look and I can see some headlines that I might be interested in. I get my update on my finances because I'm always tracking how good Apple would be doing if I hadn't sold the stock 13 years ago. And so those things are right there, and then I can go straight to my desktop. So I like that. I like the fact that you can drag your mouse wherever you are. If you take your mouse pointer in the upper right-hand corner, it opens what they call charms, and it puts down the right-hand side a set of buttons, one of which is your power control button, one is your settings button, one is a share button so you can share whatever you're doing with other people. So it opens up that interface. If you go to the upper right-hand corner, it goes to any of those apps that you may have running, those tab apps, or blank, whatever they call those chunky things on the front page on the formerly known as Metro.
Well, they just call them tiles?
Tiles, there we go. That's the word I was looking for. I knew it was a T word. I'm getting tired. Another. And the bottom, you go to the bottom left-hand corner, you go down there, and you'll find that it will take you to the start screen, or it'll take you back to the desktop screen. So, just the first little bit about what I like about Windows 8. The other thing I like is it seems very, very fast. They've changed some of the less known features. So when I go in and I want to set up tasks on a schedule, it actually lays it out and steps you through it and shows you the schedule in a much better way in terms of what's coming up. So when you want to offload your data, back it up to the Windows version of Time Machine, going back to episode 122 last week, where you talked about the value of having all your data saved. You can set this up on the schedule. So they've changed a few of those interfaces for some of the things you may or may not be using, and almost all of them are for the better. They seem to be cleaner. My mother-in-law said that she really liked the clean look of Windows 8 when she sat down this past weekend and looked.
Well, that's good. That's good. I was wondering, what we were going to start hearing from real people in terms of this new interface. I mean, there's so many people out there predicting, oh, it's so different. People are going to rebel against it. But I think, well, are we giving people enough credit there? Because look at something like iOS, which is very different from what people were using, and people just took to it, right? And now you're starting to see the desktop OSs go in that same direction. So I don't know. I think people, if it's simple, if it's intuitive enough to use, I think. There you go. Yeah, what were we talking about?
You were talking about how we've heard a lot of stories about Windows 8 and whether real people will be.
Oh yeah, whether people would be receptive to such a big change in the interface, and I think we've seen much more openness to big changes in how people use devices lately than I think many of the pundits give people credit for, and I think if it's well done, that it certainly could get a good uptake.
Yeah, I think a couple things are going to work in Windows 8 favor. I think the fact that if you want to upgrade, it was such an easy upgrade. It was phenomenal. I mean, everything stayed. I mean, I didn't have to reinstall anything on an upgrade. I would highly recommend. Normally, we say take the opportunity to wipe your hard drive and start again and reinstall everything. No, I would highly recommend you just do the upgrade. It's clean. Everything replaces itself. And then once you realize you're up and running, go and delete the old Windows 8 stuff, Windows 7, the Windows.old directory. The other thing that's going to work in its favor is because it's so easy to pick up and it is familiar once you get there, you're going to be able to go in and buy a new machine, and yes, it's going to have some tiles, but you're going to be able to pick it up and run with it. And then as you go forward and you get used to this and you start seeing a Windows tablet like the Surface, then you're going to look and say, well, wait a second, this is a lot like what I'm familiar with, and now I see how the touch works. Right. I think it's going to work in Microsoft's favor all across the board on that. Is it going to be as fun and as cool and as hip to use as cool as the language of the UK judge says as Apple? Probably not, but it will be very productive for those people that are in the Windows ecosystem.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll do well. I mean, I'm sure they'll sell lots and lots and lots of copies just because there's such momentum behind the Windows platform. But I'm looking forward to it. I haven't played around with it yet myself.
We'll see how it goes. I did want to toss out a photography tip. We haven't done this in a very long time. And speaking of long, this one's about focal lengths. So I just want to point out that if you're taking pictures of people, portraits, and you have a zoom lens, pay attention to the fact the longer the focal length, the better it's going to be. The ideal focal length for photographs is if you're shooting 35 millimeter film, 135 millimeters is about right for a fixed focal length. For that type of thing, that you want to keep from having is if you shoot a wide angle or a smaller focal length, you get blow out their noses out of proportion. You get a little bit of distortion on the image. So to keep from having that distortion, you want to be further back, zooming in on them a little bit, and then you get a more natural look to their face, and they don't complain, oh, my nose is huge, oh, my ear is huge. They'll look fine. So check your focal length. Make sure you give her a longer focal length. If you have a digital SLR with a multiplier for that chip in there, like a 1.6 multiplier to the lens to make it like a 35 millimeter. So you say 1.6. Well, if I need to get to 135 millimeter, then I want to be at 80 some millimeters is about the same as 100 and something millimeters. So you play that game a little bit. Do a little bit of math. It's going to be worth it. And since I did cut off the show, I'll run my pick real quick, and then we'll go to yours because yours seems a lot more interesting than mine. My pick is over my shoulder. For those looking at the video, you can see I have a whiteboard on the wall now. It's a clinging whiteboard. It's called Magic Whiteboard. It's 25 sheets of poster board size. You just pull them out of the box. I don't have the box handy. You pull them out of the box. They're static cling. You put them up on the wall, and they just stick there, and you're off to the races. You've got a whiteboard. You can wipe it. You can do everything you normally would with a whiteboard. And when you're done, take it off the wall, roll it up, and use it again on somebody else's wall some other time. But this way I can have a whiteboard here in my home office without having to put screws in the walls or anything else like that. And the link here takes you to Amazon. 25 sheets of this, 65 feet total, is about $50. You can get various sizes at various places, but pretty much you have to buy it online, it seems. Office Max didn't carry it in their store, neither did Staples.
Looks good. Now, for adult use, primarily, I would think, because I could tell if I put that thing on my wall here, all of a sudden my kids would be drawing great things on that whiteboard, and they'd get to the edge and keep going. So just be careful.
Yeah, I am going to do a couple things, even for me. I'm going to go, and you know that they now have blue masking tape instead of brown.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the blue masking tape, and I'm going to put a border around there for two reasons. One, I also don't want the eraser to go off and have a nice blue and red smear on the wall.
Nice halo on the wall, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be a little careful about that, but it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Now yours looks interesting. A software RAID. Now, are you talking about RAID as in hard drive RAID?
Yeah. So here's what happened. So I talked about my iMac hard drive crash last time, and it got saved by Time Machine. But it also made me think, let me just check out my whole storage strategy, right? Because one of the things I do is I have an old, and wow, 2003-4 time frame, Power Mac G5 tower.
Mm-hmm.
That basically I just use for backup storage, and I had it set up. I put two identical hard drives in it, and I had them mirrored as a RAID. Right, okay. So it's something you can do in Mac OS X. You just go right into the disk utility. You select the two hard drives you want to use, and you can say, I want to make these a mirrored, RAID set. So basically, it just keeps both drives identical. And what does that do? Why would you do that? Well, you do it in case one drive dies, you don't lose all your data, like what happened on my iMac, which only has one drive. It died, kaput, everything gone. If it had a mirrored drive, it could have kept running and warned me, hey, one drive is gone, but I'm still running here for you, but you might want to back up the remaining drive. Well, guess what? When I checked out that machine, and I was just checking out the storage, how much space I had left, guess what? One of the drives had died.
On the RAID drive?
Yes.
Oh.
Now, the computer was still running, but one had died, which means I got saved again and didn't even know I was in trouble because one of those drives had died. And so I'm thinking, wow, I'm glad that years ago I set up that RAID set in that computer, because there was some stuff that I was just keeping there, and I was my only copy. I could have lost even more, and not even known it. So I'm glad I set that up. I went out, and those drives were pretty old, right? That was an old machine that I had that set up on. They were like 500 gig each, which was big at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I went out and got, at Fry's around here, they had a deal of 2 terabyte Hitachi drives for like $99. So
That's a deal.
$50 a terabyte is a deal. So I got 2 of them now and put that in as a mirrored set. So much bigger storage, but still the same protection. And so anyone, if you know anyone running a Mac that's capable of running more than one hard drive, you want to get 2 identical drives. They can be external drives if you have a fast enough connection, but in Mac OS X disk utility, you can just set up a software RAID. They call it software RAID because this is just Apple software at the OS level creating this RAID. It's not hardware RAID. Like there are some hardware solutions where you buy cards or storage bays that handle that mirroring or striping if you want to just increase your throughput but not get the backup. Do it at the hardware level, which is probably a little bit faster. But for just doing backup and having that protection like I had, if you're not already taking advantage of it, you might want to take advantage of that feature in OS X that gives you that ability to just quickly, painlessly set up these mirrored sets. And as I experienced, one died and I was still running fine, and just had to then decide what I wanted to do about it, and end up getting 2 bigger drives.
But that's great because I can do that on my BIOS on my desktop. I can tell it that my 2 of my drives are RAID or whatever. I don't because I have external storage. My Netgear Stora drives, I have 2 of them, one with 2 1 terabyte drives for 1 terabyte of RAID storage, and I've got 2 2 terabyte drives in the other one for a total of 2 terabyte storage there as they mirror each other. And again, a hardware solution, but that was an expensive hardware solution to put in place. This software idea is a great idea. And once again, Apple has some great solutions there.
Yeah, not often talked about, but really a good solution if you just want that extra little bit of protection. And wow, I was glad I had that protection, but I'm thinking, wow, what happened? Why do I have hard drives dying?
And why didn't they tell you,
this.
though? That would be the other question. Why didn't it let you know?
They did let me know. I just had, I only used that machine. I archived stuff, and I didn't even have the machine like running. I just put stuff on it, and I sat it aside. I said, let me just make sure nothing else weird's going on. And luckily, I noticed it. I'm like, wow, that one's dead, but the machine's still working. I better do something here. But wow, I could have lost, that stuff too if I'd left that machine the way it originally came, with just the 1 drive in it, thinking I had a backup copy. Well, I did. But hard drives can die. Even if they've just been sitting around not running a long time, you power them up, they die. And so that's what happened. I had that archive, had it kind of sitting off to the side, wasn't using it, but I knew I had some stuff on there that was good to have saved. And if I had not had it mirrored, I would have lost it. Right. So definitely something you always want to think about.
Yeah, great pick and tip rolled into one. Well, once again, tech failed me. Hey, if we go through the show, for those that are wondering why we had a little bit of a blip there, I hit the wrong button and shut down the Hangout, but the audio kept recording over here on Audition. I'll be editing that bit out. But that just proves that, once again, that tech
was real.
There we go. Let me save this real quick. Save session as, and I'll end.